It's funny. Behind some of the most world-changing, almost invisible technologies, there's usually a surprisingly human story. A story about frustration, about hitting a wall, and about the kind of brilliant collaboration that changes everything. Well, today, we're diving into exactly one of those stories. The story of a programming language that quietly powers almost everything you touch, from your phone to your car to the massive servers that run the internet itself. If you have ever tried to learn to code, I bet you've seen this. This is almost certainly the very first program you ever wrote. It's this universal first step for programmers everywhere, a simple tradition that basically says, okay, I'm here, I'm learning, and hey, my program actually works. This simple little greeting is, without a doubt, programming's most famous tradition. But have you ever stopped to think, where did that actually come from? I mean, why this specific phrase? Why do millions of programmers all over the world start their journey in the exact same way? Well, the answer, it turns out, takes us all the way back to the 1970s and to the birth of a language that would, and this is no exaggeration, change the world. All right, so this tradition that we all know and love, it first showed up for the whole world to see in a now legendary book that was published back in 1978. And that book is The C Programming Language. It was written by two absolute giants of computing. You've got Brian Kernighan, who is the great evangelist, the communicator, and then you have Dennis Ritchie, the quiet, reserved genius who actually created the C language. And really, their story is the story of C itself. So let's back up. Why did C even need to be invented in the first place? To really get that, you've got to look at what came before it, which was, to put it mildly, kind of a mess. See, C didn't just pop out of nowhere. It evolved. It all started with a language called CPL, which tried to do absolutely everything, but was just way too complicated. So that led to BCPL, which stripped things way down. And that led to B, an even simpler version that was created for a very specific, very urgent need. Every single step here was a rebellion against complexity, a hunt for something that just worked. And what's so cool here is this fundamental clash of philosophies. On one side, you had these behemoth languages like PLI. They were these massive projects that tried to solve every problem for every person, and because of that, they were often just too complicated to use effectively. And then on the other side, you had BCPL's approach. Keep it simple, do one thing well, and maybe most importantly, make it portable. That was a game-changing idea at the time. And this brings us to one of our main characters, Ken Thompson. He's trying to build a brand new operating system. You may have heard of it. It's called Unix, on this tiny little computer, a PDP-7. Now get this, it had a grand total of 8 kilobytes of memory. You heard me right, kilobytes. Your toaster probably has more memory than that today. So he couldn't use some big, clunky language. He had to take the simple ideas from BCPL and strip them down even more, and that's how he created the language B. It was a tool born out of pure, absolute necessity. But as it often happens, solving one problem just created a brand new one. The Unix team pretty quickly got their hands on a much more powerful computer, and all of a sudden, their super simple language just wasn't cutting it anymore. This new machine, the PDP-11, was a massive leap forward. It was way more sophisticated in how it could handle different kinds of information. But the B language, which was designed perfectly for that simple little PDP-7, was now holding them back. It was actually too simple to take advantage of all this new power. They'd hit a wall. And here's the crucial issue. It all comes down to this concept of data types. You see, the B language basically only understood one kind of data. But this new PDP-11 could handle all sorts of different kinds, like whole numbers or text or decimal numbers. B's lack of data types wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a fatal flaw. It meant they couldn't properly port their beloved Unix to the better machine. They were completely stuck. And enter our second hero, Dennis Ritchie. And this quote from his longtime collaborator, Brian Kernighan, tells you everything you need to know about the man. He was the quiet, persistent, relentless problem solver who was about to take on this challenge and see it through to the end. So over the next year or so, Ritchie just dug in. He didn't invent a new language out of thin air. No, he methodically evolved what they already had. First, he added those crucial data types, calling his creation newbie. Then, he kept going, adding other powerful features he knew they desperately needed for Unix. And when he was done, he called it C. And the result of all this work was absolutely staggering. By 1973, the two of them had completely rewritten their entire operating system in this new language, C. This was revolutionary. I mean, think about it. For the very first time, an entire complex OS wasn't written in machine-specific code, but in a portable, high-level language. The world of computing was, at that moment, changed forever. Okay, so they had a groundbreaking language. They had a revolutionary operating system. But an invention is only as good as its ability to spread. And for that, you don't just need a genius inventor. You need a great communicator. And this is where Brian Kernighan steps back into the spotlight. He was kind of known as the record keeper for the team. The guy who was just amazing at writing tutorials and explaining how all this complex stuff actually worked. He deeply believed that teaching people how to use these tools well was just as important as creating the tools themselves. So, in 1978, Kernighan managed to convince the very shy and reluctant Dennis Ritchie that they absolutely had to write a book. And the result was the C programming language, this little, slim volume that became so incredibly influential that for over a decade, its version of C was simply known as KNRC. It was the standard. And the book's impact was just off the charts. Because it was so clear, so practical, it was translated into over 20 languages and sold millions and millions of copies all over the world. It didn't just teach the syntax, it taught an entire generation of programmers how to think and code in C. Kernighan himself was incredibly humble about the whole thing. He always said that having Ritchie, the actual creator of the language, as his co-author gave the book an authority, a credibility that it could never have had otherwise. It was that perfect partnership of the creator and the communicator that made it a masterpiece. So when you zoom out and look at the big picture, what is the ultimate legacy of this language, born out of necessity in Bell Labs all those years ago? Honestly, it's almost impossible to overstate. First off, C became the bedrock, the foundation for so many other major languages. C++, C#, Objective-C, even Java. They all owe their syntax, their core ideas, to the groundwork that C laid. It's truly the grandparent of the modern programming family tree. But maybe the biggest idea, the most profound shift that C introduced, was portability. Before C and Unix, software was basically shackled to the specific computer hardware it was written for. C broke that chain. All of a sudden, you could write a program once and have a reasonable expectation it could run on all sorts of different machines. This idea is what created the open, competitive software industry that we have today. All right, let's fast forward to October 2011. The news cycle was completely dominated by the death of a true tech icon, Steve Jobs. And the world, rightly so, mourned a visionary who had fundamentally changed how we all interact with technology. But just 1 week later, with very little fanfare, Dennis Ritchie also passed away. And here's the final thought I want to leave you with. The entire tech revolution that Steve Jobs is so celebrated for, including the very technology that Apple used to become a global giant, was built directly on top of the foundational work of Dennis Ritchie. Without that quiet, persistent genius who gave us C and Unix, the modern world of technology as we know it, well, it simply wouldn't exist.